Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and happy World Narcolepsy Day!
Happy World Narcolepsy Day!
We're so glad you're here. We have such a special event today for you. I just can't wait to get into a conversation with Lauren and Isiah Thomas. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Where are you guys located today?
We're in New York, right outside of New York City today.
Awesome. So Los Angeles to LA, and we're just so excited to see people tuning in from around the world today. And World Narcolepsy Day, if you guys aren't familiar with it, it's our fourth annual, I can't believe, 4 years that we've been doing World Narcolepsy Day on September 22nd as a day for global awareness. And just celebrating both the amazing people in our community that are overcoming adversity every day, and also raising awareness so that we can help to reduce those long delays to diagnosis that people experience. So we're just so grateful for such an incredible community online. Lauren and I are both, and Isiah, we're all online, and we see just such a great community of people on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And so yeah, today is just a day to celebrate all that we are doing together. So I think I'll go ahead and introduce Lauren and Isiah Thomas to you guys. They probably both need no introduction, but Lauren Thomas is an advocate, a daughter, and a friend living with narcolepsy with cataplexy. She was diagnosed in 2019 after a long journey with misdiagnosed sleepiness, something we will get into in a second. Lauren loves to share her story and resources to help others make their situation a little bit better. And she is also serves on Project Sleep's World Narcolepsy Day Committee, helping us plan for World Narcolepsy Day every year. We're so excited to have Lauren here, and her father, Isiah Thomas, is a Hall of Fame basketball player and a 12-time NBA All-Star. He is named 50 greatest players in NBA history, and then also the 75 greatest players more recently. Isiah Thomas played his entire professional career with the Detroit Pistons, leading the team to the 1988-89 and 1989-90 NBA championships. He is currently an analyst for NBA Live TV, an entrepreneur and business owner, some great champagne that I'm familiar with, and a proud father and advocate for narcolepsy awareness. So we're just so grateful to have both of you guys here with us, and for all that you guys have done to be part of this community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us and welcoming us into the community.
Yes, we're honored.
So let's go back in time a little bit to start. Maybe a time we don't always like thinking about, but that journey to diagnosis. I know for many people, the average is 8 to 15 years delay in diagnosis from when your symptom starts to when you're diagnosed. And I'm curious to hear both of your perspectives on, what that experience was like.
So I was diagnosed, trying to remember, I believe 2019. And I believe I started complaining about my sleepiness being an issue around the age of 15. I was a very active kid. I was a very good student, had an active social life, and would always find a way to sneak in a nap when I could. My friends, like at school, I was often caught sleeping in the school lounge, in the student lounge, but never anything that was, I guess, alarming enough for teachers or anyone to kind of reach out to my parents. I was under the care of a psychiatrist, and I was, as a teenager, we deal with different depressions, anxieties, traumas that we have to go through. And I was on antidepressant medications, and they kind of thought that my sleepiness was a symptom of my depression. So I feel like I kind of was I don't know if I was misdiagnosed, because I definitely, was kind of, dealing with my own depression, But I feel like the sleepiness part of it was kind of, just swept to one side when it was something that I continued to complain about through the rest of high school, through college, and through my adult starting to work years. I would say it probably hit, a big tipping point when I decided to start working. I moved into New York City outside of my parents' home, and I was really having a hard time keeping up at work. I was, having to commute to work. I was walking to work sometimes, a walk, a 25-minute walk that would seem easy for some people seemed so extremely grueling for me that then I was, starting to take cabs to work. Then I started just becoming a little late to work. And luckily my boss, as compassionate as she was at the time, instead of just firing me, she was like, okay, Lauren, this seems unlike you. I know this isn't, what the behavior that, you want to be exhibiting, but what can we do here? Is there something medical going on? I just feel like, your sleepiness is something that, we've noticed as well. And so from that point, believe we started going down the route of trying to look more into the sleepiness. I was also gaining weight kind of rapidly without understanding why. And I was working with a weight loss specialist who kind of said, you know what, when I don't have patients that are responding well to, diet, exercise, sometimes I go and have them looked at for a sleep study. Because he was thinking it was possible that, maybe there was a sleep disorder going on. And this doctor was at Cornell. He referred me to the Cornell Sleep Center. And I would say from there, it probably took about, 6 months or so to get into my sleep study and all of that. But once I did my sleep study, they immediately were like, this is textbook narcolepsy. And what I have since learned about narcolepsy is, when you're not sleeping, your metabolism isn't working. So as soon as I kind of, got on medication, got diagnosed, I would say that I felt like everything in my life that seemed to be kind of out of place or out of reach, hard for me to manage, feel like everything kind of started to come into place.
It's really interesting talking about the depression versus sleepiness. I think that's a big thing for a lot of people as part of their journey. So thank you for sharing about that. And I'm just curious now, looking back, so many years through this journey, in your own words, can you think of how you might help someone understand what could possibly be the difference between experiencing sleepiness versus depression?
I would say for me, it's definitely when I feel my sleepiness that is from my, narcolepsy. It feels, it's just something that I know that, when you're depressed, that, it is true that it's very hard and difficult and sometimes impossible to kind of get out from whatever it is that's causing you that much pain. But with narcolepsy, it's almost that much more intense and it's without, I guess the sadness that comes along with it. When it's just sleepiness, I feel like it's just this like big, weight that's on top of me and, nothing's going to happen until I nap.
Right.
But there isn't necessarily a sadness that I feel like is accompanying that, if that makes sense.
That's a really, really wonderful point. I've never actually heard anyone make, because you hear about people like having to take a nap on their wedding day, and not that you can't be depressed on your wedding day by any means, but that actual need to sleep, is, and maybe it's just a little bit different. And that's an interesting way of thinking about it. So yeah, I'm interested to hear a father's perspective. If anyone has read my book, which I know you guys have, my dad was such a big part of my experience throughout, pre-diagnosis and post-diagnosis. And I wasn't at home. I was, living in Boston and he was in New Hampshire, but still, it's always, I think, interesting to hear outside perspectives, especially with things that are kind of, invisible. So do you feel like you picked up on things, or were you sort of surprised by the diagnosis?
I was surprised by the diagnosis because it was something that we just didn't consider or never thought. And we as you talk about the journey, you realize, like, okay, this is not Lauren. This is not who she is in terms of her personality sometimes, but couldn't figure out what was underneath it. And once we got a chance to find out what was underneath it, or what was on top of some of the other things that she was dealing with, then you were able to separate and then start learning and getting educated about what to look for, signs, how to help, and be aware, and then to let others know, what it is that's actually going on, what you're looking at, and how can you assist. And there were several times throughout the journey, and we're still going through it now, where you're learning, you're getting educated, but most importantly, you're being inspired. And that's what I keep saying every time I see her or talk to you or talk to anyone else in the community. The inspiration that I get from just watching, listening, and learning, and then seeing how we can help others within the community, just on their everyday jobs. We are fortunate to have good medical care, but even with good medical care, you realize how hard it is to be diagnosed properly, and
Right.
From a timing standpoint. So it's important that we keep advocating, we keep communicating, we keep talking, and let others know that this is what's happening, and this is how you can assist at this time. And what I've learned throughout the community and dealing with Lauren is, like, okay, key word, at this time. Right? This is what I need at this time. Okay, now I'm good. And that's, so it's, like I say, she's our inspiration in the family, what she's dealing with, how she's dealt with it, and I just think your attitude and outlook, once you receive the diagnosis and know what you're dealing with, and the way you approach the rest of your life, and you've been a big inspiration. I'll tell this story, and I hope you don't mind me telling the story. So after reading your book, Lauren, was preparing for a race also, and she was going to, do a race and everything else. And that morning, we kind of missed the time slot, and she didn't get up, and we didn't wake her up, and she missed the start time of the race. And that was a big moment for us, and that was a big moment for her, but also just the communication and understanding and being able to talk about these things. You don't realize how inspiring you have been in the community and opening up all of us and reading the book. And, so it's a big moment in all of our lives. It's a big time for understanding. And, I'm just hoping that through these Zooms or through, World Narcolepsy Day, we can let other people know, especially people who are holding down jobs, that, okay, I can do the job, but along with me comes this. And if you give me this little bit of time, then I'm good. It's not that I have to be totally out of society or be shamed.
Yeah, I think so. Moving into like the support post-diagnosis, I love that at this time. That is such a great phrase. And trying to understand that it varies day to day, moment to moment. And I've been trying to think of something catchy for Instagram or something to kind of bring that out. So I think that that's the perfect phrase at this time, because it does shift so much and it can be so invisible. So Lauren, do you feel like, did you get your diagnosis and feel like you were ready to communicate right away and to explain what this was to your family and your friends? Or do you think it was kind of like a journey to be able to figure out what you need and then be better equipped to have people help you?
I think it was a little bit of both. When I was first diagnosed, I remember it was January that I got my diagnosis. And it was that same year that I participated in World Narcolepsy Day. And I feel like it was around probably like that summer that I finally really started communicating about it, posting about it. And, probably, helped reading your book during that time as well. But I felt like once I got diagnosed, I really dived into just kind of trying to find other people that were going through this and how they were coping. I joined, Facebook groups. I joined, I watched YouTube videos. I kind of like anywhere I could find any information, because unfortunately, I feel like even in, the 3-4 years that I've been diagnosed, I feel like there's been a lot more conversations about narcolepsy. But originally, when you type in narcolepsy into Google, even when I was diagnosed, there wasn't a lot of accurate information. And definitely wasn't a lot of information that left you feeling hopeful. So I felt like I really needed to find community. And through Project Sleep, I feel like I've really found that. There's also other great organizations out there. Narcolepsy Network, I did one of their podcasts. And I don't know, I feel like I kind of eased into it. But then once I found my groove, I realized that this was something that, for me, isn't going away and should just kind of become a part of, my, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but a part of my gospel, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. So finding that community of other people maybe was part of, so I don't think I didn't find community for longer, I think, after my diagnosis, and that was 2007. So, Instagram didn't exist at that time even. So, it was just, I didn't find community first, and have that help me find my own voice, sort of, as an advocate. So I think that's a really interesting and like wonderful thing. Like, I'm so glad now that, like you just found us right away, and maybe, within a few months, and that's just so exciting. We still hear from people, like last week for a broadcast, that someone said they had been dealing this for 25 years, diagnosed, and still was just finding us, and finding that community. So it's such an important thing. I did want to mention also Wake Up Narcolepsy, which has a event on tonight, a World Narcolepsy Day event at 6 p.m. Eastern. I think they're doing a really cool event of narcolepsy, people with narcolepsy around the world. So be sure to tune in for that as well. There are such great groups. Now for World Narcolepsy Day, we're co-leading this with 31 different organizations around the world. So we just added an organization in Bulgaria, which is so cool. I think Japan also recently joined the group. So those communities are, growing. Like Lauren said, I think there's just more online now, which is so helpful. Lauren, go ahead.
For those who may be joining the Zoom, who may not be as educated as you two are, and we're still getting educated about it also. Sometimes people just think like, okay, you go to sleep. Can you two talk about the lack of sleep that what occurs and what this is about.
Yeah, it's a lot of lack of sleep, especially, I was always considered, a night owl, and then a late riser in the morning. But, really, I felt like I was, so tired, so exhausted, wanting to sleep, not being able to sleep. Then, when it is time to go to sleep, I'm like getting these bursts of energy in the nighttime. And it really messes with, I feel like it's very isolating because what your brain is going through is so different than what your peers are going through. So to try to, I feel like even get a little sympathy for it is difficult because they can't fathom, oh, sorry, you're just a little tired, like take a nap, or, oh, you want to stay up late. Like, there isn't a lot of, I feel like, sympathy around that, but it is extremely isolating.
Yeah, I mean, that 24-hour nature of narcolepsy never goes away. And then bringing in hypnagogic hallucinations and sleep paralysis, thinking that you're seeing things and hearing things that aren't there, feeling like you can't move when you wake up. I mean, some of that's very terrorizing in and of itself. So, I've heard some people say like they're even afraid to go to sleep because of what's going to happen to them, which feels so real in the night. And then, as Lauren said, about the mistiming and even with treatment I take at night, I'm not getting like a solid 8 hours by any means.
You get like, 3 hours, in like two bursts.
Yeah. And so we're grateful for the treatments that are there, and they are, they definitely improve my symptoms, but it's certainly not a cure. And just, I think what you said about being isolating, for me, it seems like I'm pretty good at like, hiding it, I guess, sort of, I take a nap every day, but I work from home. And so no one really has to see it. And I could kind of even write it out of my own experience if I wanted. And so I've been trying a thing this summer. I'm training for my 4th marathon. And so I've been trying every time I do post, after I finish my practice run, I'm all proud. And so I want to take a picture and say, oh, I ran, 3 miles today. And I've also been making myself also put how long I napped for, that day as a reminder that they both were part of my experience, even for myself, because I think I just want to kind of push the sleepiness out of my experience that, whereas like, ooh, yes, 3.3 miles I ran, I know that number, but then I'll be like, how long did I nap for today? And I'm like, I don't even want to think about it. Like I've already like taken it out of my day. So it is, and in the nighttime time when you're alone, it doesn't really, other people don't see what it's like to go through that night after night. So, I think bringing up those nighttime aspects and the 24-hour nature is so important.
And adding cataplexy in with all of that and not being able to, fully trust your body is another aspect that I feel like is just completely terrorizing at times and embarrassing, draws attention to you and you don't necessarily want to. And
right. That's the more visible aspect, I guess. So what is your experience like with cataplexy?
So my experience with cataplexy is often like a bob of the head, or, dropping, a glass or something, but, with laughter, with like being scared. If people aren't familiar, cataplexy is normally triggered by, strong emotion. But it's definitely with medication, I feel like something that has, very much not become such a big part of my life. It used to be, I feel like, a lot more of a dramatic part of my life that wasn't something I really looked forward to. But with medication, I feel like it's become a lot more subtle.
with for me, friends and family really do bring out my cataplexy in good and bad ways. I don't know if you guys have had any experiences, with being around your family and that triggering either good or bad cataplexy.
Yes,
Can I tell a story
definitely.
about the All-Star game?
Oh, sure.
So one of I would say the real cool experiences that we've had. I work at NBA TV doing the NBA All-Star game. Lauren and I, as people know, we kind of roadies. We travel together. We go everywhere. So we went to the NBA All-Star game in Chicago, and Lauren, to her credit, is like, okay, I'm just gonna. When you talk about the journey, she's like, I'm just gonna power through. I'm gonna push through, and I'm gonna enjoy the moments. I'm gonna enjoy everything that life has to offer, and I'm not gonna let anything hold me back. And that's what we admire about her. So we get to the All-Star game in Chicago, and this is where I think Candace Parker was like, I mean, we talk about a star like on the court. Let's talk about how she was off the court, during this moment. So my two bosses, Ben and Tara, we're at the Chicago All-Star game, and I'm in the back, I'm working. Lauren wants to she wants to, enjoy the moment. So she's out in the
I'm in the stands.
She's in the stands and she's watching the game and everything. All of a sudden I get a text and it's like, okay, we got to get to her.
I need to nap.
She needs a nap. It's the middle of the All-Star game and it's like, hey, I'm doing my thing on, getting ready to go for TV, and it's like, sorry, time out. I gotta go. And then it's like, is everything all right? Ben is my boss. I'm like, yeah, everything's good. And so now we finally get Lauren, and we bring her out of the stands, and we bring her back to the back. And this was the educational moment. So now everyone who works at NBA TV, my bosses, Candace, everybody else, they're like finally getting a chance to see, what narcolepsy is and what it isn't sometimes. And so now the care that happens, and when you talk about, we have, when it comes to my kids, I think everybody knows, I got no embarrassment, I got no shame, none of that, right? But the cool thing was, our family, friends, coworkers, there was no embarrassment, there was no shame. It was like, what can we do at this moment? So Lauren was trying to play it off, and we got a picture of her like walking, and she's like leaning on me, right? And she really is like, can't like walk, but she's like, just one more step. Okay, I got to stop right now. And so we standing there, and people are like taking pictures. Hey, Isiah, so forth. And she's like, okay, let me get myself together. Okay, I'll take two more steps. So we take two more steps, and then it's like, hey, Isiah, how you doing?
Yeah, like imagine being so exhausted, like the feeling, like, right? You're like can't function, can't speak, can't even keep your eyes straight. But then you gotta like walk through like the press and the autograph line.
Oh my God.
Candace was great. I mean, Candace was like, she came back, she kept checking, because Lauren had to lay down in the back. So she laid down in the back, taking a little nap, trying to get herself together, waiting for the moment to pass. And, Candace finally said to me, I'm being dad and everything. She's like, no, I got this. So she kept coming back in, and I was like,
her mom
okay,
took over.
So it was a beautiful moment, I think, educationally for all of us. But the cool thing was, in that environment, it could have been embarrassing, it could have been shameful, but there was no embarrassment, there was no shame. It was only, what can we do?
Yeah.
And we put on our smiles and we kept it moving.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I mean, that's just an example where you tried to put on your father hat, but you can't completely take off your, like other celebrity hat doesn't kind of come off just so that you can walk your daughter, to take a nap. Oh my gosh, I can just picture that. And I just love what you said about like when Lauren called and you have to take it. That's how my dad was. Like, no matter what he was doing, he always answered the phone for me. And sometimes I felt bad because he'd be like, "Hey, Jules, what's up?" And I'd be like, "Nothing, just calling to say hi." And then he'd be like, "Okay, I'm in a really important meeting. Can I call you later?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to," but he was just always there for the good and the bad, and always answered no matter what he was doing. So,
but I think it's important that people understand and that it's really only for that period of time, because later on that night, we're sitting there drinking champagne and like, having a good time and, with her friends and everything else. So it's like during that moment, you just have to get through that moment. And like I said, she's been unbelievable, inspirational to all of us.
And I think this kind of, just triggered a memory for me, but going back to kind of pre-diagnosis, I would say that was probably one of the most confusing and challenging parts, I would think, for my parents and also for me, was that sometimes I was, bubbly and bright and ready to go, and other times I could not get out of bed. And, it wasn't just, for the exciting things that I was, up and about. And it wasn't just for the bad things that I was in bed. It kind of, it didn't matter what the case was. But I felt like trying to explain that to people, explain that to doctors was so confusing, and also like a little belittling, that sometimes they'd be like, "Oh, well, you could do this, so you're probably fine."
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I have a new analogy. And people are liking it, so I'm going to go for it. It's that like the sleepiness of narcolepsy, people often think it's that we're going to fall asleep so quickly, right? Like right in the middle of this conversation, we're just going to be down. And my new analogy is it's almost like needed to go to the bathroom, where like you had a sense that it's coming, sort of, and usually like you can sort of get to more appropriate place for that to happen, somewhere more private. And sometimes, yeah, there are times like when you're out on a hike and you really have to go and like you end up, peeing in the woods and a friend is watching you, and like but for the most part, I think, it's not going to be this instant thing where it's like takes over so quickly, right? But then also kind of like once you do go to the bathroom, or once you do have your nap and your head goes through REM world, then you can come out of it and, feel better for a certain amount of time, and be back to that bubbly self that you are. So I don't know. What do you guys think of my new analogy?
I love it. I think it's great. It's appropriate.
Yeah, I do too, because it's, again, Lauren has shared so many moments with us where now that you're aware that, these situations happen, and she's made some friends, like she told a story, like, when she was in Utah with the champagne, moving around, and she felt it coming on, and she went back to a spot where she was, could kind of handle it herself. But then she found a friend who was there also, going through the same thing.
I met a friend that was, also laying down because she had a mess. And so we both, were bonding over our, fatigue and, different chronic illnesses. And we're, now she's one of my best friends, but we just happened to meet because we were at this work event and, both decided that, it was time to rest.
I feel like that's kind of like, even when you talked about that all-star game, and was that what it was? An all-star game or an all-star game. And then that example, it can be sometimes hard to know where that balance is between self-care and pushing yourself, like we want to push ourselves sometimes, but sometimes we do need to just like go and take that rest. How do you feel like you've figured that balance out, or are you still working on it? Or how do you know when you need rest versus, okay, I can push through, sort of?
I feel like I can kind of start to tell when the autonomic behavior starts happening. And I'll like be in a conversation and all of a sudden like kind of be completely lost about what was going on. But, you know, everyone seems to not really, you know that I'm not really in on what's going on, if that makes sense. I feel like once that starts happening, I'm like, okay, maybe I should, start, getting my stuff together, heading home. I also will notice that my legs will start to just kind of like almost feel a little jello-y, like just like almost like I ran a marathon that day, like just like they'll just be so tired, so heavy. I'm like, okay, like time to, those are kind of my tells. But it's definitely a work in progress, and I'm so grateful for medication and, both long acting and short acting, to kind of get me through moments where if I need to push through, let's say I'm traveling or something, that I have that, that I'm able to use. And I don't really look at it as a crutch. It's just, what I need to do to keep going.
Isiah, do you feel like you can notice things more over time, when Lauren might be kind of zoning out, or is it still confusing?
It sometimes it's confusing because when you look at her face, she's just like, look at that, right? She just, sometimes you can't tell, right? But I think for us, just the education in being prepared, knowing, what time of day it is, what time of night, did you take your medicine? So but the key thing for us is, how did you get any sleep last night? Right? Are you going on, 22 hours or no sleep? And with that, sometimes there's, people are irritable, or they're not, they're not thinking straight, or they're, it's like they're quick, and it's like, okay, well, she didn't sleep, and this is how any of us would act if we didn't get enough sleep. So it's like, okay, so those little things are things that we look for. But I would just say for myself, and I think for us, just now knowing what we're dealing with, being prepared, right? So what time you're going, what time you're coming home, what time, and because sometimes you have to make sure, like, because she'll just power through, and it's like, okay, well,
when's nap fitting in?
Yeah, like how you gonna do this, right? So, but being able to communicate, talk about it, no, I like say, no embarrassment, no shame, just okay, how we gonna get through? And again, I do want to emphasize, like, it's just at that time. It's not like all the time, where this is like, and I think for people who are, in a work environment, with employees, and that it's important that, they understand, like, okay, this is just for this time. And then, we got to go. Like Max, he does a good job.
Yeah, I think what I was going to say when you said a little bit about irritability, that's how I know I need to not push through anymore, is my mood. I can start to sense a negativity towards the early evening, and think, nah, maybe I could get through without a nap. But then if I notice my mood going, then that's like, okay, I need to lie down. I need to take this seriously, which you think I should know every day, but I still somehow sort of pretend like every day I don't have narcolepsy and that I would just be able to get through. And then isn't it so funny that inevitably every day that's not true?
Always such a surprise.
What? I mean, you can lead World Narcolepsy Day and still not be like, huh? This is really a part of this thing every day. Yeah, well, I also shout out to Lynn, because I know, Lauren's mother is such a, big part of this team as well. So I, just love Lynn, and I can't wait to meet all of you guys sometime soon. Yeah. we got to make that happen now that things are, opening up and more travel. So that will happen in person someday.
We're not stalking you. We just know everything about you.
Yeah, we know your run schedule, your nap schedule.
Hey, I put it out there. I love it. I'm so grateful for this community. I guess so we should talk a little bit about raising awareness and some of our efforts and your efforts. You guys have both had some pretty cool opportunities. I guess to start though, why is raising awareness important to you both?
Raising awareness is important to me just because I just feel like there's just so much more compassion and understanding when there is, awareness built, and especially in terms of, our laws and our, pharmaceutical access, things like that, are changed through advocacy. If no one's talking about it, there's no one there to listen. So that's, my main thing is I just want to make everyone's lives, as fruitful as possible.
Yeah.
And I would say for me, I echo that. And, I would just want to, you just want to help, you realize that there are other people who have this situation, and, it just brought up a memory of when we were in Atlanta, checking into the hotel, and, Lauren, needed a little assistance, and at the hotel, they knew nothing of narcolepsy, didn't know how to treat, how, and this is, a nice hotel that they should have understanding of it. Well, to their credit, what the hotel staff and manager did, the next time we came, they wanted us to have a meeting. Well, not us. They wanted Lauren to have a meeting with the staff, talk about narcolepsy, so forth and so on. And she did a great job of explaining it, and not only talking to the staff, making them aware of what they should look for with different guests who may be checking into the hotel. So I'll stop and let you tell,
When I checked into the hotel, I was very fatigued. I asked for a wheelchair. It was a long travel day. And, then I was kind of asking, I guess some accommodations that, weren't so out of left field, but, I did ask if, my alarm, I, was there for work, and I did ask that if my phone, if the phone alarm that they call, if I wasn't answering that, if someone could come in and wake me up. And I guess when, I wasn't, waking up right away, they were concerned, about, other illnesses, if something else could be going on. And so, then when I, got up, we were able to say, no, I have narcolepsy. Sometimes, it's hard for me to get up. I'm, having sleep paralysis, things like that. But it was a very, I feel like it wasn't like a judgment. It was never a judgmental tone. It was always, what can we do best to kind of service our guests? And I thought that was a very cool moment where I, was able to teach about narcolepsy that, I feel like can, be, that affected, and who knows if, that went through corporate, if maybe other hotels are now familiar with narcolepsy. But, I feel like my narcolepsy, it's not something that is ever going to away. It's always going to be something that's affecting me. So people are going to encounter it. So I want people to best know how to deal with it. And
they did incorporate it into the staff.
Yeah.
What to look for, not only what to look for, but what is it that you're looking at? Because sometimes it could be, misdiagnosed as something else. So
Right.
It
Right.
was, it
And
was
with
just
one
a
in
very
five
cool
people
moment.
having a sleep disorder, they're probably incorporating a lot, encountering a lot of people with sleep disorders,
Right.
at hotels.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Project Sleep's got to get on that a little bit more. I think that's, they always talk about how they want to make it such great night's sleep for you, right, at a hotel.
Yep.
But that's really important. I feel like, Isiah, 2 years ago, I think it was, you had the opportunity to be on TNT, the Arena show before some playoff games, I believe.
Yeah.
And you got to share about World Narcolepsy Day, which was probably like one of the cooler moments of my entire life, seeing that. And so surreal. And I know we had people reach out to us afterwards and get connected with the cause from that. What was that experience like for you?
Again, the work environment and what we've been able to share, through our experiences, with, Tara August and Ben, they've been just like, unbelievably supportive as a company, and not only supportive as a company, but being able to let us share that, with an international, community, and have them discuss it. Again, there was no shame, no embarrassment. How can we help? And it's been beautiful. I mean, Lauren, they love Lauren and care about Lauren more than they do me. So I'm just kind of like the sidekick now. When they call the house, it's like, can I speak to Lauren? How's Lauren doing? It's like, oh yeah, let me speak to Isiah. So but it's been great. And Lauren is such a, and I'm just not saying this because she's my daughter, but she's such a great spokesperson and communicator in terms of what's going on. And then she has the sensitivity of, knowing how far to go and when to pull back with the audience that she's talking to. So, at that given time. So it's been great. And I'm glad to be on this journey with her.
So what, Lauren, has been your experience with some of the different opportunities you've had to, everything from the hotel, but, you were on video.
It's been really cool. I got to do the NPR channel for University of North Carolina. And also I did the Wake Up Narcolepsy podcast. And I've been featured on, Project Sleep on the blog a few times.
Podcast. You just were a recent podcast.
And the podcast. And I feel like every time I get to share my story, I just hope that there's someone that can relate to it and feel like they're not alone, because that's what I was looking for when I first got diagnosed. And it was really like soothing for my soul when I found it. So if I can be that for someone, like that's really all I'm looking to do.
Have you had those experiences of connecting with people?
I have had those experiences with connecting with people. Actually interesting, both. I had one where a friend of mine saw some of my posts that I was doing about narcolepsy, and one of her friends had actually just been diagnosed with narcolepsy and was kind of, looking for, any information about it. And she was able to connect us right away. And then I was able to connect her with Project Sleep and Julie. And it was kind of a cool, way just through friends of friends communicating to bring someone into the fold. I also had another experience wearing my World Narcolepsy Day t-shirt where someone laughed at me.
What?
They thought narcolepsy was a joke. They thought that my World Narcolepsy Day t-shirt was somehow comical. And it was a really good teachable moment because I was able to keep my cool even though my friends around me were, kind of ready to mouth off. But I said, actually, I have narcolepsy. Today is World Narcolepsy Day. I gave her my Project Sleep wristband. And, I said, Project Sleep has a lot of information about it. It's something that I deal with. And today I'm celebrating. And she was very embarrassed. And I think, hopefully walked out, and maybe it was, a conversation at their dinner table that night. Who knows? But I'm sure next time she hears the word narcolepsy, she won't think it's funny.
Mhm.
Well, and the really cool thing that I've seen Lauren do, over the years is, take moments like that to educate and not, not take it as an insult or slap. It's like that moment that she took as a teachable moment. Had her personality been something else, it could have been, an insulting moment. But she took that moment to educate, and I've seen her do that thousands of times. People reaching out over the internet, late night. Remember there was a person from Iowa that reached out to you, and y'all shared, back and forth, and through that moment, you helped that person. That was a pretty cool story too.
Yeah. Do you feel like, I feel like probably as a basketball player, like mindset is so important, and how you have sort of like handled things throughout, your career. I feel like probably mindset's a big piece of it, right?
Yeah, you can choose to be happy. Happiness, it is a choice in terms of how you look at, certain situations, and
sometimes it's a hard choice.
It's a hard choice. But and this again is when we go back and, how Lauren has just been so inspiring for our family, because, what she's been dealing with over the years, the misdiagnosis over the years, she could easily be sitting here sad, mad, and grumpy, and have every right to be sad, mad, and grumpy. Let's say that again. She has every right to be sad, mad, and grumpy, but she has chosen to be, optimistic and happy, and it, so it's, when you talked about the journey at the start, watching her go through this journey is like, watching someone, truly climb Mount Everest over and over and over again every couple of weeks, and not complain about it. It's been pretty awesome watching her.
I hope every person with narcolepsy hears that and knows that's the truth, because thank you for saying that. It really means a lot. I think my experience as a runner with narcolepsy is funny that when I'm running a marathon, people are amazed by the marathon. And it's still my experience that it is hard. It is hard, and especially hard with narcolepsy to run. But running a marathon is not as hard as living with narcolepsy every day.
Yeah.
It's very linear process. Like you do these things and you get the results, and it builds up, and it gets complicated with foam rollers and PT and stuff, but it's still a very linear thing. Whereas I guess to me, narcolepsy can be so multi-level, emotional, physical, so much to deal with, day, night, it just doesn't really go away, and there's no end, there's no finish line, which is a different experience. So I love that idea of, just having so much respect for our experience as people with narcolepsy and Lauren's experience. So thank you for sharing that. And I hope people, tuning in today can feel, their inner strength and what they're going through every day. So I know we're getting late. This has just flown by, the time. I was curious a little bit about, for you, Lauren, managing multiple chronic conditions. A lot of people in our community do deal with other things on top of narcolepsy. And if, that experience for you has given any different insight or thoughts.
Yes. So I have endometriosis, And that also has a big delay, a big delayed diagnosis, about 10 to 15 year delayed diagnosis, having to see, 10 plus practitioners to get diagnosed. It's trying to get diagnosed with that. I got diagnosed with endometriosis after I was diagnosed with narcolepsy, but had symptoms, since I was about 10 years old. So living with that, I also have some orthopedic conditions that require surgical intervention. So I've had about 4 surgeries in the past 16 months. Whether it was, from endometriosis, my hips, my femur, my back. It's been a lot. I would say having a support system, my family, luckily, I live with my family right now. So having that support system so intimately has been a game changer. And also having them with me through my doctor's appointments, because when you're dealing with one issue, it's, complicated enough. And I still believe that everyone should have an advocate, no matter if you're dealing with one issue or 10 issues. But having multiple issues that I was dealing with, trying to communicate that to the doctor when, that's not necessarily their specialty, but they need to prescribe a medication that may interfere with something else that I have going on, and then trying to get in touch with the other doctor. And it's exhausting for someone that doesn't have narcolepsy. But being able to have my support system to kind of help me, with some of those more administrative tasks of communicating with doctors and scheduling appointments, has been such a blessing. Definitely if you're dealing with lots of, chronic pain, isn't really helped if you're not sleeping. So that is something that I feel like I'm struggling with a lot right now, is just being in a lot of pain all the time and not really being able to sleep because you're in pain, but not really being able to do anything because you're in pain. It's a lot. I've come a long way. I am now learning how to walk, which is very exciting. And then I will have to do it all over again with doing my other hip and femur in the future. So I have, lots of surgeries coming up, lots of PT coming up, lots of narcolepsy coming up. It's just, how it is. But I think, like my ed was saying, I try to, live in the moment and live to the fullest. And that's kind of where I'm at.
Do you feel like any specific doctors have been more open to being educated about things that aren't in their specialty, or have you had good experiences with them being like, oh, wow, or resistance? Or
I've had both. I've had, experiences where my medication has been, has been questioned and actually thrown out while I was, in the hospital. And we know how important our nighttime medication is and how hard it is to get, for, that to be mishandled and, lost that's happened. So now I am very adamant when I bring in my medications, if I'm ever in an inpatient setting, if I have to bring in medications from home that they don't have at their pharmacy, I'm very adamant about how they are stored. I make sure I tell them the story about how it's been mishandled before, and make sure they understand how important it is to me, how, to administer the medication, because sometimes they, try and mess with the lid and it, don't know how to administer it with the correct, they try to use one of their own syringes instead of the syringe it comes with. And it's just, everything you can imagine going wrong has gone wrong in terms of administering medications. So I feel like when I am first ever in inpatient setting, I try to have each nurse that, because, then the shift changes and you have a whole new crew of people. So, each time either myself or my advocate, which has been, one of my parents, needs to have a conversation with the team about my medications and how they're administered and how they're stored. Sometimes that can, make me, maybe if they think, I'm being difficult, I don't really care. But I have had other instances where it's been, very welcomed information and helpful. And they've asked for, pamphlets to have at the nursing station, or they've asked for, the nursing manager to come have a talk with me because she wants to know more about it. So it's been, I would say, unfortunately, more difficult than easy.
Yes. Yeah.
But, it's my journey and I have to kind of take control of how my health is being taken care of.
Right. And I truly bet you are paving the way for someone else. There will be someone else that will be in their care and will, and they will hopefully be more educated because of your experience being that first one. And so I'm so glad that, and that kind of idea of being a difficult patient. I mean,
yeah, like when doctors
important.
come into your room at, 5 a.m. for vitals and a talk, and I have to explain that, like, I may not be able to do that at that point. And they're like, well, this is our schedule and this is how we do it. And I'm like, well, you can try it, but I'm going to be asleep.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm just so glad that you educate from big platforms like NPR and in the hospital to medical professionals that need so much more education too. So every single piece of it, and that you guys use your platforms. I have a feeling that, having such a big platform that many people could ask you for support for causes and efforts. And it just is so meaningful that that you guys do choose to raise awareness with Project Sleep and narcolepsy community, because I think it goes a really long way. And it gives me a lot of hope that we can really reach people. And so I do have a few basketball questions really quick for Isiah, because, we couldn't do this without a little bit of basketball in there. My brother is shout out to my brother, Chris, is a huge basketball fan and a huge Isiah Thomas fan. So he was curious if you had any specific players that you liked playing against and possibly also that you disliked playing against.
So I like playing against, believe it or not, I like playing against the Lakers, the Celtics, the Bulls. They have the great players. So love playing against Michael Jordan, Chicago Bulls. Love playing against Magic Johnson, Kareem, Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, Dennis Johnson with the Celtics. Now, you would think that those would be the guys that I didn't want to play against because they were so good. But those are the guys that I really enjoyed playing against because they brought out the best in you. The players that I didn't like playing against were actually my teammates in practice because that's when I really became the low man on the totem pole. So Vinnie Johnson every day, he would just use me. Like he was, Mahorn, every time I drove to the basket, he would crunch me or hit me. So, my teammates in practice, those were the guys that I dreaded playing against because they were kind of physical and good.
Gosh. My brother's other question was about the physicality of the sport, that he thinks that there's a lot more focus on 3-pointers now. And what you think about some of that change over time.
Yeah, I would actually agree with him. There is more focus on the 3-point shot than it is, executing, plays to kind of get closer to the basket. shooting higher percentage shots. And all the rules now really favor the small player. Like if I was playing right now, I would have the benefit of all the rules basically geared towards my style of play, smaller people. Back when I was playing, all the rules favored the bigger players. So, if you were 6'6" and above, though the rules were for the big guys. Now the rules are really for like the smaller guys, people who can run around on the perimeter and shoot 3-point shots. And that seems to be what everyone likes. But I like more of a balance. I wish big people were allowed to play. I wish big people were allowed to use their size. I think the body types that you find in the NBA now, everybody's the same size, the same body type with the same kind of, arm length. Back then when we were playing, you had different body types, you had, big guys, short guys, thin guys, you had people who just could, play the game. Right now, the game has really just, really everybody's kind of like the same. I liked it when we had, people who, from Bill Laimbeer to Mark Aguirre to Isiah Thomas, we were all on the same team and could play together. But now everybody is 6'6", 6'8", 6'9", about this big, and it's like, all right. But I hope it goes back to where everybody can play and not just certain body types can play.
Yeah. Talking about exercise and stuff, Lauren, I know you love dancing, and I love you guys. I'm pretty sure I've seen some videos of you guys doing some singing and dancing in the car. Do you guys have a favorite tune that that is your go-to car tune?
We love Bruno Mars.
And Stevie Makes Us Happy.
Yeah, and we love Stevie Wonder. Stevie Makes Us Happy. And, any good oldies.
Yeah. So one of Lauren's therapists, right? So, we always, like you say, we like to sing and dance. And so after one of Lauren's many surgeries, and she just rolled off her surgeries kind of quick, but I want everybody to know, these surgeries are really serious and they take a long, long time to recover and everything. But anyway, one of her therapists, came in, and this is when Lauren was, getting out of bed, and we had to, get her on the walker, and she was trying to walk. And of course we had the music going, and it was Bruno Mars, 24 karat
magic in the air.
And so while she was trying to get, the therapist said, when the power came,
put your pinky finger to the moon.
So the therapist goes,
like in solidarity.
Yes, it was so cool. So it was one of those great hospital moments that we had, so we on this journey, we down, we've been with her through thick and thin, but I've said this to her before, it's a long journey, but had all this not happened, I wouldn't have gotten to know her, adult Lauren, the way I know adult Lauren, because she would have been off living her life and everything else, which is cool. But the way I've gotten to know her now, I never would have had this time, and we never would have had this time. So I look at it as, although it's been painful, it's been a gift in terms of getting to know my adult Lauren.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like this focus on celebration, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to continue to celebrate.
Oh, yeah.
There, guys. I got to get that song on, and now I'll think of you guys. And just, everyone around the world that's tuning in, just thank you guys for being part of this and celebrating what we have as a community and our wins when we can have them, and knowing that your adversity is real. We've just been talking about it, and I'm just so grateful for both of you for coming on and sharing so openly about your experience. There's just no greater gift, I think, in the world. So thank you for doing this for our community, and we'll just continue celebrating.
Thank you. Thank you.
We had a great time. This is awesome.
All right. Bye for now.
See ya.